Good morning, this is Shindo, continuing with this series of videos I'll be doing about the presidency and how much it is like a king. I would like to start briefly, since it is President's Day, to talk about, of course, one of our greatest presidents, our first president, George Washington. Now, George Washington is probably not known very well for his presidency, at what he actually did as president. And folks, that's a good thing. George Washington was a very reluctant president. He did not want to do it, as you can understand, considering he didn't know what to expect and he didn't want to be a king. He thought that the role of president was too much like a king, and when he was unanimously voted in by Congress to be the president, his response was basically, "Do I have to?" I've been reading an article here called George Washington, the Reluctant President, from the Smithsonian. Since it's President's Day, you might want to check it out. I will put that in the description box. Not a lot to say about George Washington as president. Sure, I could get into it, but he certainly was not a regal, kingly president. Yes, he did do things that you would expect a king to do in that position, but by stepping down after 2 terms, he certainly made the role as president and king as minimal a role as any president that we've ever seen. So, moving on from Washington, I'd like to talk today about the president who came after George Washington, that is, John Adams. Now, I will give a little leeway to our early presidents, since the Constitution wasn't fully established as law, and they were just sort of trying to figure things out way back when. However, the actions of John Adams were absolutely like a king and a tyrant. I will also put a link up of this I'll be reading from. This is about the Alien and Sedition Acts. This is a website simply called ushistory.org. If you don't believe that what currently Donald Trump is doing is constitutional, or you believe that it's unprecedented, that he is overreaching his power of enforcement against aliens, then folks, you don't know American history. Now I'm going to read straight from this so that you can see that this is well documented and known by anyone who researches American history. This is not unusual for a president to take the kind of authority that Donald Trump has been and will take. Of course, as I already stated, you will find this link in the description box. If you have stumbled across my page, I'd be surprised if you stumbled across it with this particular video, but if you have, please subscribe to my channel, like, comment, share my videos. This is number 2 in a series of videos about the presidents. The Alien and Sedition Act. No protesting the government. No immigrants allowed in. No freedom of the press. Lawmakers jailed. Is this the story of the Soviet Union during the Cold War? No. It describes the United States in 1798 after the passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts. Now, I will tell you this. The difference between this and what Trump is doing is that Trump is not pushing it through Congress. But like I said before in the last video, Congress is an ineffectual nothing. They approve a budget that continues to raise our national debt. Basically, they're just approving using a credit card for the future. They're not doing anything in Washington. The Congress has been either just a rubber stamp for the president, or they have been so ineffectual to get nothing done. Throughout the history of the Congress for the past, about 100 years. About 100 years. And I'm going to get into the 20th century, when the Congress really started neglecting their duties, and I'll get into why that is when I get into speaking about Woodrow Wilson, which won't come until a couple more videos from now. But the Alien and Sedition Acts, okay, the strong steps that Adams took in response to the French foreign threat also included severe repression of domestic protest. A series of laws known collectively as the Alien and Sedition Acts were passed by the Federalist Congress in 1798 and signed into law by President Adams. So this is the difference between him and Trump, who's just writing executive orders to get this done. Yes, I know Obama did it. Yes, I know Bush did it. Folks, I am not trying to pick on Donald Trump specifically. I am talking about the presidency as the executive office, as a royal decree making office, as though they are king. At least John Adams passed this through Congress. Okay, what is the Alien and Sedition Acts? Well, without reading this and just telling you from memory, the Alien and Sedition Acts, basically the Alien Act, you think it's big that Trump has stopped certain countries from coming in here? In the Alien Act, it stopped all immigration. Anyone from coming in. The Sedition Acts, sedition being a fancy way of saying that you don't like what people are saying about you. The Sedition Acts was passed in order to prevent the press, sound familiar, folks? In order to prevent the press from saying what they wanted about the president and the government. Here specifically, reading again from this, Sedition Act is in essence the act that prohibited public opposition to the government. Fines and imprisonment could be used against those who, quote, write, print, utter, or publish any false, scandalous, and malicious writing, unquote, against the government. Now, wouldn't Donald Trump love that? And of course, we have the idea of judicial review, which of course is what stopped or overturned the executive order that Donald Trump passed. By the way, he's planning on putting out a brand new one, and if that one gets stopped through judicial decree, then he'll just write another one. Folks, the president is a king. He wasn't meant to be this way. It wasn't meant to be this way. Reading from the article, the Sedition Act clearly violated individual protections under the First Amendment of the Constitution. However, the practice of, quote, judicial review, whereby the Supreme Court considers the constitutionality of laws, was not yet well developed. I will, of course, as I've said now, put this in the description box so you can read these for yourself. I'm going to just try to concentrate on one president at a time, so I'm not going to be talking about Andrew Jackson I am reading a book, finishing a book that I got from the library about Jackson, so that will help. Although the crucial part that I'm going to be talking about was skirted over in the book and not even discussed. But that is what history is, folks. History is written in order to give you indoctrination. The whole purpose of history is to indoctrinate the populace into believing that, in this case, the United States of America is the best and always was the best and always will be the best at everything it does. A more informed populace, I assure you, a more informed populace would not have had these two people to choose from for President of the United States. I will say this about Adams. He was not reelected in no small part because of these Alien and Sedition Acts. And our greatest president, in my humble opinion, became president after Adams, Thomas Jefferson. Do you know, in my humble opinion, what makes a great president? A great president is one who does the least that they can do while they're president. The federal government is not supposed to be sticking their nose in our business. And you may think right now that the idea of Donald Trump doing what he's doing is a help to this country. And maybe it will be to some extent. But I assure you, if he goes against certain people, like, for instance, Muslims, then he will eventually come against people who aren't Muslims, but just don't fit into this right-wing, conservative, Christian standard of what an American is. And if you don't fit those standards, folks, which I imagine most of my subscribers don't, if you don't fit those standards, then you are going to be the object of persecution, just like the Muslims. If you think they're not being persecuted in this country, folks, the Christians complain about persecution. It's nothing compared to how the Muslims are being persecuted and will continue to be persecuted, and worse, by the society. Not the government. I'm not saying the government's doing it. By society in this country right now. Now, you can say all you want to about Muslims and their religion and what they believe. It's their beliefs, folks. It has to do with them. It has nothing to do with you. Unlike Christians, the Muslims aren't coming and knocking on my door and trying to convert me to being a Muslim. And unlike Christians, they're not coming on my videos and telling me I'm going to hell. I mean, regardless of their beliefs, which I certainly don't agree with, they're their beliefs, and they're not trying to push them on me. But I digress. I will continue to talk about the presidency as king, as someone who believes he is above the law, really. And this will really be reflected in the next president that I'm talking about. I'm only concentrating on this particular aspect of presidency. The presidents that take this kind of action independent of any outside branch of government. Now, I wanted to mention Adams and the Alien and Sedition Acts because, folks, we're seeing the Alien and Sedition Acts Part 3. Part 2 was under Woodrow Wilson, which I will be discussing later. I believe, folks, that we fought a war to become a nation against the idea of having a king. So if you love the idea of Trump or Obama or Bush or Clinton or any of them taking this kind of power independent of any of the other branches of government, then we might as well have a king, regardless of whether that king is a merciful and kind king, or whether he's a tyrant, he's still a king. The executive office and the position of presidency has increasingly become more and more king-like, and no more than Andrew Jackson, who I'll be discussing in the next video, the really laying the foundation of the president just taking matters into his own hand. And as long as they have the support of the people, and that's what Trump understands, trust me, he knows exactly who to appeal to. He's appealing to the military and to the police for a reason. And regardless of what you think of John McCain, he is exactly right when it comes to Trump and when it comes to a free, unfettered media. John McCain this weekend said that Trump going against the media is exactly the first thing that a tyrant does. And do you know why Trump is going against the media? Because he is a tyrant. The same people that are supporting him today, I assure you, one way or another, he will turn against you. Because that's what all tyrants do eventually. They turn against everybody. The man is a paranoid schizophrenic, and he sees enemies everywhere, and he will see you as one eventually. So, continuing with this, we will be discussing Andrew Jackson next in the next video. This is Shindo. Have a good Monday.